How many women literally in their dreams get cheated on and then all day they don't say anything? They're just mean to the men.
Oh my God, I know. Did this thing and it was terrible in my dream.
Yes, I'm sorry that happened to you. Bro,
Oh my.
I think about this and I'm like, Kate, and think about her, all of those feelings all day, and she had to stifle because she doesn't feel safe enough in this relationship to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't see that it's a safe space for her to express.
Yeah, and maybe that was my fault of not creating that safe space for her to be able to express those feelings.
Yeah. And it also comes down to personal choice too, because even if somebody shuts down my truth, I personally will always speak my truth. Hey, that actually hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Hey, that makes me want to run right now. Because once you're self-aware, you stop giving the fuel to somebody to throw it on your fire.
Yeah, good point.
Like, you can't ignite me if I already tell you I'm pissed. Your own emotion cannot be magnified if you're aware of your emotion.
Welcome to the Right Podcast, where we are going to be exploring all things relationship, emotional health, and the dynamics between different types of relationship. Today, we are going to be discussing gender roles in relationships. And these have changed over time. Obviously, they're different than they were 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. And with me today, I have Nikisha, Trina, and David, who are going to be discussing their thoughts on gender roles and if they still apply in modern day society. So with that, I kind of just want to jump right in and kind of unpack the concept of gender roles. So they've been around for centuries. As we have evolved as people and society has changed, they have also changed as well. So kind of my first question here is, how would you define traditional gender roles in relationships today, and are they still relevant? Nikisha, let's start with you.
Yes, I believe that they are still relevant. How I would define them is that the woman is here to nurture and care and show her children what love looks like, and men are here for stability and structure. I see that in so many things: business, family roles, family dynamics, and I just think it's a beautiful thing that we get to reawaken within and understand that, like, we've been on one end of the spectrum and now we're coming back to a different spectrum.
Okay, I like that. Trina?
I don't feel that they're relevant these days. I feel like, a lot of women want to get out and work. They want to be able to have a flexible schedule, so they still want to be able to raise their children as they see fit to their schedule and what that allows. And I personally know a lot of women whose husband chooses to stay home and take care of the children for the women that want to work. I think it could be some type of mixed ball of whatever you're trying to achieve for your own family unit to kind of achieve the things that Nikisha talked about as well. But you do have, extremes on both sides. But I definitely think we're heading in something that's a little bit different. They're not relevant.
Yeah, okay. David, what about yourself?
I think they're very relevant. The definition definitely is fluid, especially with today's economics and different things like that. It makes things a little bit more challenging, with lifestyles and different stuff like that. When it comes to newly coupled relationships, I don't think there is definitely a gender role that has to happen. But as families evolve and children come into play, I think that's where a true dynamic comes into more play and more understanding and more structure.
Okay. So kind of a follow-up question to that, and I'll start with you, David. Do you think these gender roles create stability in the relationship, or are they more a source of conflict between the two parties?
It can be 100% of conflict. A lot of that to me is respect and appreciation that causes the conflict rather than a lack of gender roles. So if someone chooses to stay home, the appreciation of that person saying, hey, I see what you're doing. I understand your hard day just as much as you understand my hard day and you appreciate my work. I think that alleviates a lot of that hardship or the contention in that gender role. It's when it becomes unbalanced is when a lot of that hardship comes into play.
So as long as both parties are bringing something of value to the table.
Well, I don't think it's even value. I think it's because value to me may be different value to her, and so forth and so on. So I think it's more of just an understanding of saying, hey, we've chosen this path. I appreciate that path. I appreciate what you're doing in that path more so than if you do X, then you're going to get Y. Then it becomes a transactional more than it is an appreciation. And once again, I think that's where the conflict really comes, is when I did this, so I deserve this, is when it really gets spicy.
Yeah.
Trina, what about you?
I think that unspoken expectations create conflict. So as, David was saying, newly coupled relationships, whether they're married or just starting out, those can look different if neither party is speaking what they're expecting from the other, or even discussing what they're wanting the relationship to look like, or how they want that path to look when they have children. So I think that effective communication really is key. And I think check-in points with your partner weekly or different things like that, have a regular schedule can help to kind of prevent that conflict.
Yeah. Akisha?
I think that it does create stability when you have open lines of communication and you're able to say, hey, here's where I'm at, here's what I desire, here's what I need. That's called standards. And you allow your standards to be spoken about, then you stop going into bitterness and resentfulness with expectation. And I think that does come down to a lot of communication, appreciation, and love. I think a lot of people call things love, like berating their partner or controlling their partner, but really love is freedom.
Yeah.
So the freedom to speak, the freedom to care, the freedom to appreciate, the freedom to be in that relationship and be the role that you guys have assisted each other in becoming.
Yeah. And so I kind of want to add on to that a little bit, or follow up with, you guys had mentioned the fact that the potential is there for needing two incomes nowadays. So how does that change the dynamic between gender roles in terms of who does what and why they do it? And is there any resentment because, well, she mows the lawn and he cleans the house? Not to be stereotypical, but that's typically how it's been. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Do you want to go?
I think for me, a lot of it comes down to the relationship. If one partner has OCD, the house is going to be the sanctuary, right? And if that OCD is infringed upon, all of a sudden chaos and bitterness and all these things happen. So I think a lot of it depends on that person. If I for myself love cooking,
yeah,
and so I have a tendency to cook more and or less depending on time frames, right? But it's not that my gender role is that I'm the cook of the house. It's more so that I just enjoy it and it tastes good. So
it makes sense because that's what you like to do and you're good at it.
Yeah.
And she might be good at something else, that
organization, stuff like that, keeping the house in check and stuff like that.
I think it also comes down to understanding that making money is a tool, and so are other things like crafting and caring for the house, and then being knowledgeable. I know this sounds silly, but being knowledgeable of where's this in the house? Somebody always, especially the person that's at home, is going to know where's the damn can opener? Yeah, where's the can opener? Where's my sweater? Where's this? Did you pick up this? It's yes, I did. And I know it because I put forth the effort to know.
Yeah.
And I think that has another role of effort, an effort of caring for the home, or an effort of caring for the children, caring for the business, caring for the cars. It's an effort thing that we have come to no longer appreciate efforts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I could agree with that.
Yeah.
I have an interesting question for the two of you specifically, and it revolves around this idea of something called hypergamy. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
Okay. So hypergamy is essentially the idea that women will typically date across or up, but not down.
Okay.
For example, I would think of the general population of men. Hey, could you date somebody from McDonald's if you were attracted to him? Yes. Could you date somebody who is a corporate lawyer? Yes. Most women, I think, will typically, and again, I'm just speaking generally, hey, would you date somebody who mows lawns for a living? No. Would you date somebody who is a doctor? Oh, of course. Because, again, depending on where you are, it's typically across and up is how the theory goes. So with that, do you guys find that would influence the gender roles at all?
Well, for me personally, when I'm in a relationship with someone, what attracts me to the person is what can we discuss about our day or our life or the goals that we want to achieve. So for me, I am looking for someone who, brings intelligence to the relationship. I think that is a crazy turn on for me mentally. Like, as far as what specific job you do or the income or whether you're home or not. I mean, those are important as far as what you're wanting to build. Like if you're young and you want to have a family, you want someone who's home. Or if you're older, you're maybe wanting to focus on, or well, that will do. But your looks will fade and all of these things kind of fade. And the hype about what type of role you are, if you're this, amazing doctor or this trial attorney, that can all fade when you retire. But what really, I think, keeps me interested in a relationship with a man is what are we constantly doing to challenge one another, challenge our ideas. And so I am going to be constantly looking for that type of man, regardless of whatever type of role or job he's in. I just want to know that we are balancing each other out that way, and we're also challenging each other.
Yeah, you guys are working as a team to pursue a common goal, it sounds like.
Because it's exciting, too, because, I've been in relationships where the other person doesn't have a lot to say, or I was the person who didn't have a lot to say because we were mentally stimulating one another. And that's kind of where I think resentment gets brought in, and you're just start to get kind of annoyed by your partner. So you need that thing that's always challenging you and kind of making you look at things different and make your point of view, well, maybe look at it a different way, not one where you just, always thought because that's what you, thought growing up.
Yeah.
So
being able to change some of that mindset. Akisha?
I think the theory would be like, would I date down just to date down, or is it always across and up? And women tend to be amplifiers. So if I don't want to amplify whatever this man lives in, then I would not be dating him, right? So for instance, I wouldn't go back and date a heroin addict again because I don't want to amplify addiction in the world.
Makes sense.
However, I would date somebody who is a nurse at an addiction center, or somebody who's out there helping break off addiction, or you know what I mean, like healing that thing. But I wouldn't, it's not necessarily about their job or where they're at or the placement or location. It's more about what are you doing to contribute to the world for a greater good for me.
So does it make sense then to look at it maybe from the standpoint of as long as this person I could see potential in them for more or additional goals that we can achieve together. Does that sound like it's more accurate then?
Kind of. I'm a recovering hope dealer, so I love to get attached to men's hopes and their ideas of who they could be instead of being present with who they are being, right? And so I think that is something that plays a big role in a lot of dating, especially right now, is women are like, oh, I could see him being a good person, although he's doing X, Y, and Z. Oh, I could see even men do the same thing. Oh, the crazies, these lovely men keep getting attached to him. Like, oh, really? She's dashed your car in? She definitely could be a good mom. You're right.
Yeah, there is the trauma bonding that could occur. With the gender roles, there's often this balance that needs to be struck between interdependence and independence. So I'm going to throw it back to you, David, and ask how that plays a role in distinguishing between being independent as a man and interdependent of having to rely on your lady.
I think it goes back to what you were saying is the amplification of the partnership. It makes corporate roles, right? I can never be a good boss unless all of my coworkers and people underneath me and so forth and so on are being built up in that same process. I can't make a Fortune 500 company unless I have all these people working with me and to bring that side of it up. Same thing happens with that gender role with the relationship is I need that person in order to build the best life I possibly can be. It's a partnership. We all have common goals. We're working together. And so I think it needs to be, we are dependent upon each other in an independent way. I'm going to build her up as much as she's going to build me up. She has different facets that I do. And so my goal is to subsidize into those facets and say, hey, this is where you're maybe lacking. This is where I'm lacking. How do we build on that together? And so I think that's when toxicity begins, is when we become so dependent on that person that we lose our individuality. But I think a true relationship,
enmeshment between the two of you.
Well, I think you have to have that enmeshment. I think that's probably some of the problems in today's world is we're trying to be so independent that we never actually join forces and become a partnership. Because I want to have my goals and my things, and you have your goals and your things, and all of a sudden she's doing this and I'm doing this, and then we wonder why we never come together.
Yeah, definitely have to be going down at least the same road. Yeah. Swerves a little bit, but if you guys are going down two different paths, that can probably cause a lot of conflict, I would imagine. What do you guys think?
I think that there's a way to be interdependent and independent. And it goes back down to what you were saying. Like, do you guys support each other's goals and dreams? Whether they're the same thing or not, like, is the pathway to get there the same? Are we building each other up? Are we appreciating each other? Are we saying our daily gratitudes to each other? I think that that's something that a lot of people don't understand is, yes, you can go to Sarthi with your friends. I can go to my girls, go to yoga, but we need to come back and we need to be mentally stimulated. We need to make sure that we emotionally connect and make sure our energies connect back to one another. Yeah. Otherwise, we have these, I love these women, but we have these super hyper independent women who put on the masculine armor. And again, it's like, who hurt you so that you don't want to be soft? Why are you not surrendering into your softness? Your guard is up, but lay your sword down. When you come home, your sword and your weapons get to be laid at the door. And who makes you drop into that body, that fullness of feeling comfortable? Even for men, it's like, you could be out there at war every day. You don't need to be closing the door and coming home to a battlefield. Yeah. And I think that when we are too independent, that's what we're doing. We're coming home with our swords and our shields, and we're trying to continue the battlefield at home.
Yeah, that can be challenging. You don't want to be fighting another battle when you walk through the door.
Be your safe haven.
Yeah, I would just piggyback onto what she's saying. I mean, me growing up, I just very in my masculine energy, single mom, and just trying to do all these things for my kids and my work and with friends. And then when it came to relationships, that was one thing I was noticing as a pattern. It was always failing. And I couldn't understand why, because I was like, well, I'm a great mom and I do this great and this great, but I don't understand what they're seeing. But to me, I never knew how to be soft, or never felt safe to be soft. And so I have learned this year, I can go be in my masculine energy at work and with kids and with friends or whatever type of relationship. But when I come home, it's okay for me to just be soft and open to my partner and be vulnerable. And as much as I always cheer for men to be vulnerable, it's like, okay, take your own advice, Trini, because you can do that too. And it doesn't mean you're weak if you are wanting to rely on, my masculine partner for his own energy, and I don't have to have that masculine energy myself. So It's something I think that for me personally, and maybe a lot of people, it's just a pattern. You don't see it until you step back and you look back and you realize, why am I having failed relationships over and over and over again? Like, the common denominator is me. So obviously I'm the reason why. Why is that? And so it takes a lot of, soul searching. You can figure it out, but it's completely what she said.
Do you guys think that interdependence is more challenging today because the narrative is pushed to be that boss babe or be that hyper masculine alpha man, to be able to put down some of that armor or to be vulnerable?
I think it is. I think it's also the backpack of baggage that we all carry. We think that these rocks are just going to get lighter, but the reality is the longer we carry them, the more they push people away from us. And in my experience, interdependence becomes so scary for men to drop their guard because they've been battling for so long and been taken advantage of. And then on the other side, women who don't know how to be soft, we're not taught how to cry. We're literally just running until we're depleted, and then we don't understand our own emotions. So I think it actually is harder to be interdependent in this day and age than it is to surrender.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to stop completely dating for a little while this year and just start reading about books about what does that even mean to be soft or to step in my feminine energy or to even allow myself to receive, because that essentially is what feminine energy is. It's like receiving, and it's so hard for me to be like, well, but I have to be the one always giving. And it's like, no, you don't. That's not how it works. So, yeah.
David, I'm curious for continuing this part of the discussion from a vulnerability standpoint. I know this has happened to me. I'm curious if it's happened to you as the other man here. I have seen when I have been vulnerable in certain situations that is used to, all right, I'm going to take this, take this, to throw it back at you when I need to win an argument, when you don't do something I like, whatever the case is. So I think that does make it difficult for, I think, men generally sometimes to be vulnerable, because for some of us, it's happened where I'm giving you this knife that is very sharp to me, and now you're using it against me in a future situation.
Well, I've definitely had it happen to me.
Yeah.
100%. And for me, I would think men in general, we use stories and situations, and this happened to my buddy, as a way of filling out what our vulnerability level can be, where we say, oh, my buddy did this. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh my gosh, he's such a pussy. And you're like, check.
Okay. I know I said
road, or it's like, oh, he broke down at work today because his wife and all these things. I'm like, and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he would do that. That's not even a real man. And you're like, okay, I can no longer, I have to make sure I can't be that emotional.
Funny that you say that. He's not a real man. The prefacing it with the qualifier of not that he's not a man, he's not a real man.
Yep.
I've found that can be used, shaming tactics, and unfortunately on both sides. Women can do it to men can do it to women, and I think it's probably a pretty toxic trait if you find yourself with somebody who is using that, because it is very manipulative. It's one of those questions where one of those things where there's not really a great response to that,
Yeah.
So in one sentence, I guess, just to kind of wrap up this part of it, what advice would you guys give to somebody who's trying to balance interdependence with independence?
I would say communication. You have to definitely speak what you're wanting to achieve out of a relationship just in general, but specifically with that person. So I would say sit down and talk about it and really kind of carve out what you want that to look like for both of you.
Yep.
My advice would be authentically you, because you can't receive authentic love unless you're authentically being seen as who you are. So you won't believe their love. If you're putting on a mask and saying, my friend did this, you're putting on a mask that your friend did this, instead of saying, hey, I had this really hard moment at work, and it's still riling me up. Hey, I had this dream last night about you doing X, Y, and Z, and it hurts. Like, how many women literally in their dreams get cheated on, and then all day they don't say anything? They're just mean to them.
Oh my God, I know. Did this thing, and it was terrible in my dream.
Yeah, but it literally, think about that. Like, think about, yes, I'm sorry that happened to you. Bro,
oh my.
I think about this, and I'm like, Kate, and think about her, all of those feelings all day, and she had to stifle because she doesn't feel safe enough in this relationship to be vulnerable, because she doesn't see that it's a safe space for her to express.
Yeah, and maybe that was my fault of not creating that safe space for her to be able to express those feelings.
Yeah. And it also comes down to personal choice too, because even if somebody shuts down my truth, I personally will always speak my truth. Hey, that actually hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Hey, that makes me want to run right now. Because once you're self-aware, you stop giving the fuel to somebody to throw it on your fire.
Yeah, good point.
Like, you can't ignite me if I already tell you I'm pissed. Your own emotion cannot be magnified if you're aware of your emotion.
Well, I think it kind of goes back a little bit, just to disagree somewhat with that, is because you had mentioned that women are they will magnify whatever you give them. And so if you're already upset and something might not be received well, it could magnify the situation.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm like, say it.
No, I want to hear it. It's right there. So part of it is that communication, right?
Yeah.
So when you say previous dating experiences, woman says, I want to have a masculine man. I want to have the gender roles. I'm tired of always being the powerful one. I'm always trying to do this. And then you set up a date and you say, cool, I'm going to be there at 7. We're going to go to this restaurant. And they go, cool, can you be there at 7:30? And you're like, oh, and then you get there and then I don't feel like that. So can we go to this restaurant instead? And then suddenly all of that preparation that supposedly she wanted, she has then taken from you and becomes the owner of that date. She's dictated the time, the place, the food, everything associated with that. So was she truly seeking the femininity, but in reality never really gave it up? But to that point, and the same point is when someone comes, my wife and I have tried really hard to do this, where she is the boss babe. She is over a lot of different people, controlling that, and comes home in that stressful situation and is like, did you do this, this, and this? And I'm like, work's done. And there's that check, right? Yeah. And she has every opportunity to ignite and be like, oh, really? And at the same time to come down. And so there has to be, once again, we've talked about it, and there may be that struggle at first, but because I'm willing to stand that ground and pull her down, off of that horse, if you will, it becomes more balancing.
So that leads me exactly into the next thing that I wanted to talk about is gender roles can be a source of tension. However, they can also provide some structure to relationships. So for you guys, in your opinion, what's the most significant benefit, would you say, to adhering to traditional gender roles? And I'll open up, whoever wants to start.
I would say it builds a stronger foundation for love.
Okay.
Because in order to truly establish those things, communication is there, understanding is there, the appreciation is there, and it goes, but once again, it's fluidity of that gender role. That's where I think the old days kind of was very stifling. It was, you're required to do this. You must do this as a dad. You must do this. You must sit home and drink the beer, and the wife brings you the dinner.
Yep.
I think that's where a lot of the stifleness came into that. Now with the openness of that gender role, in the general sense of, you don't have to be barefoot and pregnant. You can have a career. You can have joys and goals and things, that now it's way easier for someone to come in and say, hey, I'm not feeling, this, or I'm not 100% today or this month. I'm going to need you to step up and help in that equation.
Trina, Nikisha?
I think one of you guys mentioned, I think that they're really great to provide stability. So I think if you don't have that communication about what you kind of want that relationship or those dynamics to look like, I feel like, a big source of conflict is just, well, what am I doing? Am I supposed to do this, or does he do this?
And that goes back to that communication you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think that's really great. And for me, I try to do that now in relationships, even with friends, parents, kids. I just think it's so appreciated. And, you kind of just set that expectation from the beginning, and everyone kind of knows their piece, and they feel comfortable speaking up if that's not really working. But at least everyone kind of knows where they're at. So
Okay.
I think...
Come on, bring it, Nikisa.
I believe that men being men and women being women creates stability in all things. For instance, if you have the ability to say, hey, you're not a boss babe, you're at home, that would allow her to be like, holy shit, this backpack of responsibility, I can just put it down. Can you get me this? Can you get me this? Can you do this? It's like that moment that the woman comes home and she can feel like a little girl again. And then that leads into polarity, right? And so if you have somebody coming home to you all the time and she is just barking orders, you're going to be like, I do not want to sleep with her. Yeah. But if she comes over and she's like, hey, I had a really stressful day, can I just vent to you? You're going to be like, I don't need to fix anything, I can just hear. And that will allow.
We usually have a problem, men generally, oh yeah, let me solve that for you.
Yeah, right. But
Hear you, but don't you want a solution?
yeah. Well, and it's interesting because if you can hear your woman by what she's asking for with her emotions, not with her words, then it's a lot easier for you to understand she's just in structure trying to keep herself safe. And you become the structure that keeps her safe.
Okay.
I always say this, women need a container to know where they can flow. Otherwise, they'll just overflow everywhere. It's you can create that container, for instance.
There's many women that would contradict that and say that would be very controlling.
Right. But they're also hurt, and they also are operating out of wounding, and they're also operating out of ego, and they're operating out of the inability to receive, the inability to slow down. I'm like, I will go toe to toe with any woman that does this. Police.
So I have a question for the two of you guys, and I'll preface it with this. There's expectations, I think, around being a woman, being a man, or in most people's mind, right?
Right.
The expectations around being a man, for example, is if you're with somebody in a heterosexual relationship and there's a bump in the night, who's getting up? The expectation, I would think, is for 99% of the people would be, oh yeah, the guy's going to go check. Is there any expectations that are explicit for women?
The babies in the middle of the night. We hear them first.
I agree with that.
I feel like also as a mom, I just, I feel like I am always worrying about my kids. Even today, and I almost keep full grown men now as for children, but I'm like, oh my gosh, where are they at? I need to check their location, like in the middle of the night. And so I feel like once I had kids, I feel like I never went back to sleep fully. Correct. I was always like 90% asleep. Or maybe not even that much, but yeah, I definitely feel like I'm gonna always be the one who was noticing first, oh, there's something wrong, or I feel like there's something wrong, Maybe that's women's intuition, I'm not sure, but
no.
I feel like I was always aware of that, or maybe just worried about it more, probably, because women, at least me, I worry all the time. Yes, overthink things.
So it does kind of go back to that, if men, back, I don't know, however many years ago, men are the hunters, right? So we're going to go out and protect, and then women having that more nurturing and caregiving role, where you were talking about children and oh, the baby's crying. Typically, I think then the woman would get up to take care of.
I feel like I always wanted to.
Yeah,
I was like, I just want to know, and I feel like that's part of like the bonding process for me as a mom, and especially where it took me and my ex-husband like years to get pregnant. So any chance I could ever get to be close to my child, especially because I went back to work, after 6 weeks.
Sure.
I cherish those moments so much.
Yeah.
So.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Flip side of the coin. What are the drawbacks? What are the drawbacks and the challenges that gender roles pose today compared to 50 years ago, 100 years ago?
Compared, I don't know because I didn't live there, but I will say,
let's go with today.
Yeah,
go with today.
In the sense of like men being men, like they feel, or there's like an expectation that you can't show emotion until you get to like this milestone or this thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's like hindering connection in all spaces and places. Because like, think of the man who can't even tell his family or have patience for his family stepping up on a rock. Then he's going to take that impatience and go out in the world and be impatient with his coworkers, be impatient with those in traffic. And it just like continues to breed the one thing that he's trying so hard not to be.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Okay. Mm-hmm. David, Trina?
I think there's a level of masculinity that's involved where the saying, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
I've never heard that, but I like that.
So there has...
It's a great quote. Do you know who said that? Because I've heard that same thing.
It's a really old quote. It's like the Art of War. So it comes from Sun Tzu. Right. Yeah. Probably. But in the same breath, another podcast that I was actually watching where it was a military guy, and he's like, you'll never know the amount of violence that I went through in order to show the love and compassion that I have or capable of doing. And so I think there's a difference with a man, testosterone, the the level of power that we have, that you have to fundamentally always quail that and hold back. So I understand that there has to be a level of emotion, but I think that's the fundamental part of today's society, is that you're telling a man that you can be an emotional wreck, and that's loving and cherishing. But at the same point, it's allowing all of that rage and that stuff that makes masculinity powerful in defense not have any place to go other than you. And so that's where you're like, open up, and you're like, but I can't because there's too much.
They say that an isolated man is the most dangerous man. And I do agree with that.
Yeah.
Because then you are the only target for him to.
Correct. Isolation usually means I can't come to you freely.
Right.
And so it goes back to that again.
Or even an isolated man without friends is like essentially what I was getting at. It's like no community around him. And the only person he expresses to is the woman behind closed doors.
No.
I want to revisit that in just a second, but Trina, what
I
do you?
am kind of thinking, I didn't grow up with really any gender roles being established, for generations before me. So I had 2 boys, and so I thought, okay, like what do I want to teach them, or, what do I want their generations to look like, beyond them. And I really just opened up to them about feelings and saying I love you out loud, and let's talk about this. And so it obviously worked, because I've got teenage sons that come to me now and say, I am just feeling really off. I don't know why. Can you help me figure this out? And so we'll sit, and it's just me and him, and I'll say, let's unpack this. Let's talk about this. And I always teach them, let's unravel where these emotions are packing from, because they're coming from somewhere. And I want them to know it's okay to come to me as their mom, and they can unravel and unpack that. And so as they grow up and start families of their own, and whether they get married or not, or they're just in relationships, I want them to feel comfortable going to their partners and, kind of doing the same thing. And it just feels natural and normal. And so, that's kind of something that I saw there, there was no precedent set before me. And so I thought, okay, this is something I want to change, so it's not something that just continues on,
And funny enough, that kind of follows what the point that I was going to make is so you're teaching your kids to be able to do that. I have a son as well, and we're trying to teach him to be able to be open with his emotions. Nikisha, what you had said is, one of the probably most dangerous types of people out there, and we're producing a fuck ton of them
right now,
is lonely, isolated, goalless, ambitionless men.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because visionless. These are unfortunately the type of people with, they don't have friends. They don't feel like they've been accepted in society. They may not have the financial resources or attractiveness to partner up with somebody, so that they feel, shunned by the other gender. So unfortunately, a lot of times that rage that you were talking about will manifest outwardly to indiscriminate people who have done nothing. And you hear about these shooters that will go shoot up, someplace. And I think that's really a difficult thing, because if you don't have goals, if you don't have societal reinforcement that you're valuable, I think you try and break away from that and just reject it all. And that's why some people go a little nuts.
So I'm going to throw in a caveat to that. And I think that's where gender roles comes in as the man side of it, where you have grace. You have the woman to that lonely son. It's okay, baby. I love you. You can do anything you want. They're wrong. Where in a man's society, it's, dude, you need to step up. Get your butt outside.
Yep.
You need to go to the gym.
Go to the gym.
You need a life. Who cares what they say?
Outlaw video games in the basement.
Yeah, this isn't going to accomplish anything. And so without that gender role of the masculinity, slapping them across the face, getting rough with them, you have that consistent, it's okay to express, it's okay to be emotional, it's okay to love, everyone's okay, they just don't understand you. There's that that unacceptance even more so because they can't grasp. I've been told one thing, but it's in reality, it's not.
Do you think some of that is due to the rise in the level of single parents and specifically single mothers, where they don't have that male role model in their life to say, no, you need to do this. That doesn't work. You need to go here. Because women are typically, again, more nurturing. Oh, sweetheart, well, boy in this case, we do this. Whereas typically a father figure's type of parenting is going to be much, much different than a woman's.
Yeah. I believe that little boys, I have 2 little boys myself. And so I always tell them, I am raising husbands and fathers. You don't get to act like this in my house. And I think that that's a huge importance to stress to all the single moms is like, we as single moms, we have the importance of being mom and dad in the home until you get a good nan to help step up and say, actually, you don't get to talk like that and you don't get to do this. But we also have the role to be that structure right now.
Yeah.
And to be that structure when you didn't have structure is kind of hard. But I think it comes back to education. I think it comes back to learning differently. Like, no, I'm not going to tell my 8-year-old, no, you can't cry. But I'm also going to say, cry while you're taking out the garbage. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like, do this. Cool, you don't want to do it, but you're not going to get your video games. No, sorry, you only get 30 minutes a day instead of 8 hours a day. And I do want to say that there are dads, and I'm just so appreciative right now of the generation of dads that want to be hands-on, that want to be involved, that actually this generation of children are going to be the generation that changes everything because they know what it's like to have parents that can be in the same vicinity, parents that can actually say, hey, we're having this issue at my house. Is it happening at yours? And coming to be a co-collaboration on the roles that a child actually has. Whereas like you and I grew up without mom, you grew up without a dad, and that is like a total different livelihood. Whereas I'm like, sorry, your dad gets to handle this. I'm the mom.
I'm curious from what you had said, Trina, following along with that. We were talking about single mothers and the difference between not having a father figure or not having a male role model, where maybe some of that softness, I wonder if it's going to be more acceptable, let's say 20 years from now, because there are more men in this case, since we're talking about men, where it shifts to a place that, all right, you don't have to, like you were talking about, David, you don't have to kind of bottle it up or push it down. You could be openly expressive with your feelings, that type of thing. Do you guys think that may happen in the future just because we're kind of instilling that
I think
now with this generation?
We're going to have men who hold men accountable instead of having men who know that their buddy's drinking and driving with their kids, who knows that their buddy's cheating on their wife and not saying anything because it's not my problem, it's not my thing. No, we're going to have men that hold one another accountable, and that's going to bring back the ability to soften for us women.
I feel like, I have to give a lot of credit to my ex-husband because he's a really great father and the co-parent extremely great. And he really holds his own sons to an accountability that I can't as a mom, and I don't know how to do that. And so I really rely on him more so now that my kids are teenagers because he just has a way that he can talk to them, and he's way more patient and just understanding with his boys, I think, because maybe he kind of had that same experience growing up. But we have a really good dynamic in that, even though I might be more of my masculine energy sometimes, I'm learning how to be more of my feminine energy. And part of that is letting him give them advice and teach them ways. And I know I can't. And so if we're talking about something, I'm like, I don't know. I bet your dad would be a better, advisor to you right now. Oh. And he has this way of like holding them accountable more so exactly to what she's saying, my kids do that with their friends. They know and they recognize, oh, this is not a good friend, or you shouldn't be acting like that, or I don't want to be friends with someone like that who treats women like that. Like those are my boys now. And I'm like, okay, great. We have got some type of dynamic. We set it up, even though we never spoke about it. And that's what led to our divorce, but it's working great.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so I'm going to move on just a little bit to talking about breaking some of the stereotypes. and breaking away from some of those traditional roles as society has evolved, and you have things like the need for dual income, which puts women obviously in the workforce to survive in a dual income household because the housing prices are so expensive, as is everything else nowadays. I am curious to hear what you guys think of what some of the common stereotypes about gender roles that now need to be challenged. And I know we've talked a little bit about them. I'm curious if there's any other ones we may have missed.
I feel like a lot of different things that I've experienced myself. I feel like how I mentioned earlier with the fact that I know a lot of women that work and men stay home, I feel like those are already kind of being challenged from what I've seen. I don't know that I typically could probably get a really great answer on this question. I feel like I'm seeing that being challenged now.
Okay.
Happen.
So it sounds like we're making some progress in
I think so. Yeah, and I feel like you get a lot more men who are kind of even speaking up for themselves and saying, I want to be a part of raising, my child and just being able to have that different type of relationship that I didn't have maybe growing up.
Yeah.
And so, they're speaking up about that and they're working it out between them too. Again, through effective communication, what they want that movement.
Yeah, you have to have those conversations because there's just actually Dr. Orion Taraban, the guy that we were just listening to earlier, he had mentioned that probably 90% of the potential compatibility between you and your partner is just the person you choose, right? So if you're choosing somebody, that's going to be the most important part. A lot of other things you can work out through communication and through discussions of various topics. But it sounds like the best way to do that is have some of those conversations. Hey, I like being a man. I like doing the manly stuff. I want a woman who does more female gender role type things, let's say cooking, cleaning, whereas somebody else might say, well, I like staying, as the guy, I like staying home and I want her to work and I'll take care of the house. And that a lot of that is just going to come down to communication.
I feel through a lot of different, even through my own experience or friends' experience with dating apps, you see a lot of males and females that put that on their bios. Like, I'm this type of person, I'm looking for this type of person, this type of role or traditional roles or whatever. And I feel like that's great that people feel the freedom to just openly write that. And then I feel like it really sparks a conversation. So I feel like people are kind of, to your point, like they're understanding like this person that I choose just affects so many things. And I want to make sure from, the get-go that I'm expressing my needs and wants, and the other person can be like, oh, I really do not want this. And so they don't even have to engage. So I really feel like a lot of people are kind of trying to speak up more because they truly understand that point. This person affects so much, 90% of, your happiness, your success, your friends, your goals that you want to create. So,
yeah.
Let's go to a crazy place. So I'm going to say one thing that I believe gender roles have definitely morphed and changed and been more accepting of is woman's sexuality. I think it's gone too far in some respects, and in other respects, I don't think it's gone far enough.
Expand on that. I'm curious.
So forever and ever and ever, the woman's sexuality was, it's something that has to be done. It's something that's expected to be done. It's a chore and I have to do this, or the man can't be the romantic and rico suave. It's something that is fantasized about, but in reality never happens. And so I think part of that gender role dichotomy that's gone away is that the woman can be the sexual tigress, if you will, the pursuer, especially in a marriage relationship or in a relationship, and the man can be the romantic, suave, rose petals and candles and stuff, and still be the masculine man. Definitely the 50 Shades of Grey kind of morphed that a little bit and, said, hey, I can be an alpha and the romantic. I can be the dominant and the supporter, kind of scenario. So
it is nice when it's not always, only speaking for myself, it's not always me initiating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is nice to have it initiated.
Yeah, I think I'm going to piggyback on that. I think that the number one thing that I see the most of is women wanting to be ravished in the bedroom, and actually speaking up about that and saying, this is what I want, this is what I like, here's how I desire it. And men are like, oh, okay, I can do that. Actually, that's so easy. And I think that it actually brings back to challenging the playfulness of somebody. If you don't have that playfulness in your relationship, then you fall into the roommate dynamic, right? And we've all been there. We've all seen it. Women the first thing they do is shut the door to sex, when in actuality, that's like the breeding grounds for darkness to rise in your relationship. But a lot of women don't understand that until the last 5-10 years. Like, that is why it's so important to have the sensuality of a woman.
So what are some practical steps that people can take, couples can take, to create more equitable, even though I don't like this word, partnerships?
You don't?
I don't. I'll tell you guys why after.
I get what you... I think one of the my biggest advice is to bring play back into it. Whether that is turning on music and being silly together, dancing together, going out and just letting your inner child play. And if you don't feel like you can do that, that comes down to conversation. Like, hey, I actually don't feel safe to even be playful in your space. Have those deep conversations. Dating is for hard times and hard conversations. Marriage is for the beautiful pictures.
I think it's totally swapped.
It is swapped in our culture, but the reality is, if you don't have the hard conversations in dating, your beautiful pictures don't matter because they're going to get shattered off the wall.
See, I think the conversations start, but the actual hardships happen in the relationship and in the marriage. And then you have to have that. So I agree with you, but it's the conversation where, like, I want this, this, and this, and I want this, this, and this, and everything's working out great. And then later on, usually a year into the relationship, the actual hardship happens. And then it's, do I fall back on what I said, or do I fall back on my reaction? Versus that kind of situation.
That's actually my next question. So when conflict arises, what strategies or tools would you guys recommend for mending the relationship?
I'm a big fan of building a bridge and getting over it. So I am the first to say, hey, I'm noticing the energy's off, or I noticed this that you said triggered me, or I want my partner to feel comfortable, and saying those things to me. So again, from the beginning, I'm like, I want open communication. Please tell me if I'm doing something that you're not feeling comfortable with, or I'm triggering you, I want to know. Like, I want to know all those things. And I even do that with my friends. I'm like, if I'm, disrespecting you, or you're feeling that way, or you're feeling like the communication or something's out, tell me now, so that we don't build up weeks and weeks and months and years of all of this, whatever, resentment. And then we forget what the original problem was. I'm like, let's lay it all out on the table. Let's talk about it so that we can, build a bridge and get over it. But then the key is to not go back to it. You can't bring it up again.
That is the key.
Can't bring it up again.
That comes back down to your thing. Okay, so first let me say my advice would be, you have the power between your reaction and your response. And in that little snippet of time, you get to decide who you be in this partnership. On the contrary to that, you can't be bringing up their vulnerabilities or their weapons, or especially in big moments of like, oh yeah, well, you did this to X, Y, and Z. Like, that's actually going to hinder connection and not create connection. However, I do agree with, I'm sorry for, here's how it won't happen again, and here's how I would like to fix it. Does this work for you, or what is your response? Because in that, you give the ability to have clear communication and the ability to hear back feedback. And I think that something that we have in relationship, in my experience as of lately, is your opinion matters, your opinion matters, your opinion matters, but this hurtful thing that I said doesn't matter. Well, then none of this actually matters either. I can't make your hurtful words no longer matter to me if your appreciation doesn't matter either.
So mutual respect.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
And communication.
David?
So I call that the 1-3-1 rule.
Okay.
So with my employees, they have a problem. They tell me 3 solutions to the problem, and they tell me the solution that they want to do.
Okay.
That's great.
And so it's called the 1-3-1 rule.
I like that.
Give me your problem, give me 3 solutions, and give me the one you want to do, and I'll tell you if I agree.
That's great piece of advice.
So, same concept, right?
Yes.
Now, I will throw the how do I, as the partner, the man in the relationship, understand what that emotional response was without triggering another emotional response.
Yeah.
You know, because that's always the problem is the man goes to logic, says, I did this, I need to do this and this in order to fix that problem. What in reality, it's I need to see, I need to hear, I need to feel, and then maybe all it is an apology. And then my actions then later on down the road show that I truly was a fault. And so for the man, it's not just let's have a conversation. It's I have to feel and understand what you were feeling and understanding at that moment to truly become empathetic of that. And it becomes a difficult process.
And co-regulation. Co-regulation is a big one with us too. Having a co-regulation pact. Like, hey, when I yell and I get mad, I really just want to be held. Can you just like remind me that you're not my enemy and I just want to be held right now? All walls crumble, right?
Yeah.
But as the woman, you have to be able to ask for what you need in the moment and not be toxic and not be hurtful and not be harmful, not only to yourself, but to that connection. I work with a lot of women and I see the most volatile things come out of their mouth. And I'm like, he's never going to forgive you. What are you doing? And then on the contrary, like men will just say the most rude things just so that he's not being that bounce of emotion. And it's like, hey, wait, stop. What is our co-regulation strategy and how are we getting there right now?
So I love all the different opinions and perspectives that you guys give. Kind of just to wrap everything up, how do you guys think, from where it's been in the past to where it is now, how do you see it evolving, gender roles, over the next couple of decades?
I think it's getting way better.
Way better?
You have Jordan Peterson. I know he has controversy. Even Andrew Tate in a lot of respects, you know, showing men that they can be men, but at the same time condemning the reactional man, you know, and holding the masculinity in check and kind of things. And so I feel it's actually it will recirculate into a better, you know, conceptual idea that I think will have more balance, you know, because now we've seen one side of it where the femininity has kind of taken over almost too much on the masculine side. And now it's coming back and they'll be, now we can compare, right? Where we were too far patriarchal, if in some respects, we went the opposite way too far. And now we're going to swing back and be like, okay, here's our balance.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of emotionally intelligent people coming up from the generation that we are and that we be, because of how we know things no longer worked for us.
I like that you said people and not a specific gender.
Well, and you have to think about all the access to information that people have now in a digital age where we didn't have it, where we're the last generation to know what life was like before. And, you know, myself as an example, or, you know, just how I spoke earlier about learning more what feminine energy